Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good in the middle of the night. This is the first technical webinar from the Circular Rubber platform. I'm super happy to have 4 presenters today, and only Harry is a member of the platform, so we're very happy to have these technical specialists to join. And I welcome you all. Thank you for your interest. This is a technical webinar, and the agenda for today is first going through compliance. We're all talking with very big companies, so it's always smart to go through that. Then I'll tell a little bit about the Circular Rubber platform, the reason you came here. Then we have 4 interesting EUDR presentations or companies with specialists from the industry. And we have Q&As after every presentation, and in the end also an overall Q&A. Compliance means that we work with companies from all around the world, some very small, some international or corporates. And it means that we agree within this webinar to do not fix any purchase or selling prices, do not restrict production, market, technical development or investment, do not divide markets or sources of supply, do not exchange individualized information about intended future prices and quantities or strategic information, and do not share confidential information. We're an open innovation platform, so please keep this in mind. But we're also a community, so please listen, ask questions, network, and share ideas. And I see indeed the group is also growing, so welcome everybody that just came in. And the first question of the webinars is always, where do you come from today? So please put your country in the chat, and then we can see how international we are today. I already saw some people coming by, and that's always good fun. So Italy, US, Berlin, well, Germany, I would count that very good. I think so. From India, also welcome. Very late in India at the moment. And really nice to see the broad... yeah, perfect. The broad reach of these webinars. So it makes me very proud as a traveler. Great. Also see Malta. That's the first. So welcome. And I'll let you leave that in the chat. Thank you very much. And then first of all, since not everybody here is a member of the platform, just a short introduction of the Circular Rubber platform. This is an initiative launched by Jan and I. We are rubber product engineers, and we wanted to understand how to lower the impact of our products. And to follow that up, we started the platform as an online community. We give circularity support, and we also initiate projects for impact. And what does that mean? We created in the meantime an online community of 375 individuals, 94 organizations and 3 universities. The circularity support means that we kind of function as a help desk. We can help you with market research, and we also support companies with rubber waste revalorization, in case you have a lot of rubber scrap piled up. And we initiate projects for impact, and this list is already on listing. But these 4 projects, like bicycle tires, polyurethane, rubber recycling, are projects that not one company can pick up easily, but therefore we function as a consortium. We build the group, and then we give it a little bit of a head start. And what do we stand for? Well, basically, circular economy was launched by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and it gives a very good set of tools to lower the impact of your products, starting by the beginning. So prevention of waste means that you don't have to recycle your waste in the first place. Secondly, sustainably sourced regenerative materials, and that's all the reason why we have this webinar today. EUDR sourced natural rubber, but also other feedstocks for the rubber industry. And the prevention of incineration by revalorization. And revalorization means the whole R letter, like recycling, repurposing, reducing, reusing. That's what we stand for. And this is a list of the companies that back up this idea, and that all have their own input into reaching these goals. We talk about rubber production companies, rubber polymer manufacturing, rubber raw materials. There are some initiatives that focus on decarbonization, like the Renewable Carbon Initiative. We have universities that work on recycling or bio-based. We have global manufacturers, corporates, and we have brand owners, and we have consultants that help the industry ahead. So really happy to be backed up. And what we do is we present their solutions to the rubber industry. And these companies are really spread out. So these are the headquarters of the companies that back up the idea of a circular rubber economy. And so you see that that it's really well started in Europe, let's say, but now we also have our landmarks in North America, a little bit in South America, and the other continents. And we still do not have any company from Australia, but we're working hard on that, of course. Individual membership means that you can follow get access to our portal, because we try to centralize the knowledge on the portal, on rubber recycling, on bio-based, you name it. We organize monthly webinars on new materials and technologies, so the companies present what they do. And this webinar, the EUDR webinar, is a new version of technical webinars. And last one is that you get direct access to a global network of rubber professionals. You can join us here, and this is of course a QR code for your phone in case you're watching. Are there any questions in the meantime? And if not, then we move on. So thanks for the attention. That's the Circular Rubber platform. For today, we basically launched a topic that started from the beginning when we launched the platform. Is one of the most important polymers, or one of the very early polymers, was the natural rubber. And natural rubber is used in many different industries, from car tires, truck tires, but also hoses, for its very specific applications and very specific characteristics. And we also have some clothing brands here in the group now, I see, that also makes natural rubber, or uses natural rubber in the elastic bands for clothing, for example. So maybe unexpected uses, but still a very important material in the industry. EUDR also raises a lot of questions with many different people, because we're talking about deforestation regulation, and why is it that Europe wants to be a front leader in this? Why is it so necessary to have this deforestation in the first place? And finally, what does it mean for the people that are working with natural rubber, somewhere from the smallholders all the way to the importers and the users? Well, we're hoping to answer these questions in this webinar. And we found very interesting companies or initiatives that have been working on this topic. So we basically try to go from, let's say, the initiation phase of geospatial mapping, understanding where forests are and therefore where deforestation happens. We go to the smallholders, and we have GPSNR, the global, well, Stefano can say the abbreviation better than I do. Sustainable natural rubber.
For sustainable natural rubber, it's a bit
Thank
of a mouthful.
Global platform. That was it. We have importer Weber&Schaer from natural rubber, probably also known by most. And we also have software solutions that support us in the supply chain. So without further ado, let's start with the first presentation. Benjamin, from the World Resource Institute, also has experience already with World Economic Forum and other very big organizations. Benjamin, are you with us?
Yeah, I think so. Is my connection clear?
Yeah, very clear. Thank you very much. And you can start your presentation by taking over the screen sharing.
Okay.
And of course, thank you very much for taking the time with us today. Very interesting moment when we met each other and talked about how basically the EUDR comes from a way different point than we expected as just normal rubber product engineers. So without further ado, thank you very much, and you have about 15 minutes. That would be nice.
Okay, so just as a first off on housekeeping, if you have any difficulty with the presentation or something because of Teams, just please immediately let me know. But is the slide deck up and working?
Yeah, looks perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So I'll try to be very fast because I didn't know what depth of background or any background anyone has on EUDR. So I'll try to cover a little bit of EUDR and a little bit of the World Resource Institute's Global Forest Watch, which is what I'm part of. By way of introduction, Enrico already gave me a very flattering one, but I used to be in agricultural research. Then I was at the World Economic Forum doing partnerships. I somehow found my way into an agri-trader named Olam Agri, which some of you in the rubber sector may have interacted with. They work in smallholder rubber in West Africa and a bit of commercial plantation rubber in Southeast Asia. And then after spending a few years on EUDR from the operator trader standpoint, I've come back over to the ivory tower a little bit to help with getting more open data resources into the industry by working in the supply chain hub and kind of private sector engagement for the World Resource Institute. So Global Forest Watch. If you haven't heard of it, it kind of came around about 10 years ago. So we have kind of a mini anniversary set of content to show what we've done. And basically 10 years ago, WRI and the University of Maryland put out one of the first kind of open access satellite monitoring of where the world's forests, and importantly, where are they decreasing each year. So that's a long time ago now in tech years. So now this is kind of part of what's baked in, but it's worth remembering how quickly things move. Because at the time, there weren't really independent numbers. If you wanted to know where deforestation happened, you just had to get an official number from the government of Brazil or the government of Indonesia. And by creating kind of an open data ecosystem where, journalists, NGOs, private sector, governments, then everyone started to play more by the same numbers, right? And this is a little bit the backstory for how we got to we have a lot of online tools now. These are mostly, WRI is a nonprofit research institute, but it hosts a lot of industry partnerships. So we provide different kinds of tools and services, either for, NGOs or the private sector or for governments. And to give you an idea of how this kind of led into EUDR, and why is over time, the more people have been using data to monitor the environment, the more demand we've had to put out global data sets from satellite data. And satellite data itself has grown a lot over the last 10 years. It used to just be basically NASA's Landsat mission when I started my career, and now the European Space Agency has a comparable satellite apparatus, and the private sector. There's lots and lots of private satellite companies now. So we're really drowning in data like many corners of the universe, but over time, what WRI's kind of contribution in this space has been is to take that data and put it through what you call the academic credibility test. So, peer review analysis, collaboration with different global research partnerships with the European Joint Research Center or other I guess SEI in Stockholm is another big one. So we try to keep our research. It means we move a little bit slower than the fastest private sector innovators. But then a lot of our data sets get used by the private sector because they have a kind of trustworthy stamp of approval. People have kicked the tires on them so hard that you know what you're getting. And then after we put out all this data and we're growing our data catalog more and more all the time. But then as a kind of research institute with a lot of partnerships, we also have what you'd call the policy influencing track, where we've done a lot of engagement. First, we build up these data sets, but it tends to be in reaction to what you call global events. So, when you have things like the Paris Declaration or Glasgow Leadership, there's the Amsterdam Declaration Conference, which is coming up. So all of these kind of policy circles, WRI tends to be there, being the voice of credible but practical science. So that's a little bit of our role in this, and very specifically for EUDR, that's also been our role. So not as the writers of the legislation, but we're part of something called the multi-stakeholder consultation, which is where the European Commission basically invites hundreds of private companies and NGOs to say, tell us what you think, or tell us how you think the legislation should go. And in theory, that feeds in and makes it better. So I just include here, and Enrico, I'll send you my slide deck in case your members want some references, because I find that EUDR is a big and also super complex topic, so it always helps to have some references at your fingertips, some websites to link to, so I've tried to include those throughout the slides. These ones are just to give you a sense of, every 6 months or every year, depending on the Brussels timeline, we've been commenting either publicly or through the consultation process. That's linked to our experience with Global Forest Watch. So as we've been one of the leading research centers on deforestation, just to kind of zoom out to, 10,000 feet, what is the EUDR and why does it matter, right? Basically, it's a piece of legislation that's saying you need to know if there was deforestation in your traded commodities if they are entering and, in theory, exiting the EU market. So, if it crosses if it crosses an EU customs point, you're going to need to provide some data about whether it had deforestation upstream in its supply chain. And the reason it's kind of necessary and important if you care about sustainability is because deforestation is a big part of climate change. In terms of emissions, it's only 13%, but next to oil, it's hard to compete. But the other part of it is when you deforest, you're also removing the carbon sinks that take carbon out of the atmosphere. So it has this kind of indirect effect of undermining the whole ability of the planet to take more carbon out. So it has kind of double penalty, and it's very linked to commodities because one of the main reasons forests are being lost is to supply land for not just rubber's in there, but soy, livestock, meaning cows, basically, cocoa, palm oil, coffee, and timber. So that's the reason these commodities were kind of identified and then not exactly finger pointed at, but saying these are the ones where, we don't want you sourcing it out of land that used to be forest a year or two ago. And the reason for that, if this is also a link to current events, is the graph in the upper right is showing like last year we had more deforestation. A lot of this is due to fires. But those are also made more possible when you start cutting into forests. So it's really part of this kind of crisis tipping point that if we lose any more forest, we are really looking at tipping the climate change scenario into the red zone. So the EU, I guess for better or for worse, depending on your opinion, it took some action. It passed a regulation. It linked it as much as it could to science and data and the economy. But it is a piece of legislation, so it's a little bit rough around the edges. If you want to read the full text, it's about 140 pages, and then there's some amendments they've done as well. But basically, the requirements are, if you're going to be sending one of these commodities, like a shipment of it to a port, then you have to provide a due diligence statement. And that statement has to contain a bunch of technical information, which I'll try to get through really, really quickly. So I originally was educated on this as a kind of sustainability due diligence focal point for a commodity trader. But I know a lot of you on this call may actually be what I would think of from that vantage point as like a downstream purchaser. So depending on where you are in the supply chain, you may have slightly different requirements. If you are just procuring rubber, but from a processor or operator that is already within the European economic zone, then you're not necessarily going to have your name on a customs waybill, right? So you might have different requirements because this is what someone who's bringing product into the European market has to do. Now, I'm hoping if that's your situation, this is not your first education on the EUDR. However, if you are, let's say, a consumer-facing goods company and you're procuring a blended product and you happen to know, okay, I know it has some natural rubber in it. This is more than you would expect a company. So I'm not completely educated on the latest amendments, but my basic advice would be if you're buying rubber now and it has natural rubber from outside the EU in the product, you should be able to request from your sourcing company that they can provide you the due diligence statements that it came with, and they've simplified some of these recently, so there have been some adjustments, but basically you should be able to find out from your sourcing company where it came from, and that they submitted this due diligence statement to your responsible authority, I think is how it calls it, but it's basically, you know, like the customs clearance agency of the port where it entered the EU. So again, I'm going to go lightning speed because otherwise no one else will have time. But it asks, in short, for, you know, exactly what are the geolocations of the place where the rubber was produced, which I think is more straightforward if it's coming from a plantation. But I'm hoping Stefano will educate us about the complexities of smallholder traceability for natural rubber, which I think is, I won't even talk about it. It sounds very challenging to me. And then you basically need to take those geolocations and run them through some geospatial due diligence. Was there a forest there and now it's rubber? Is it inside a kind of indigenous or protected communities land rights? Has there been any kind of due diligence or human rights ethics associated with that location? And then, you know, you're meant to have risk mitigations, and you package all of this into a statement that goes with your customs waybill when it clears EU customs. And that's the sort of thing a downstream consumer-facing company could request from with their sourcing. So what's WRI's role in this and Global Forest Watch? Basically, we provide a lot of the data, not all of it. So the legislation doesn't require anyone to choose or pick one data set. But because WRI and the EU Joint Research Center are kind of, for the most part, the two open and public sources of these sorts of data sets, and we work closely together, we're kind of one of the two data ports of call that a lot of commercial analysis companies use as their input data. And we provide a lot of advice and expertise, as I said, on the legislation. So all of our data sets are open, and we provide a lot of kind of technical blogs, academic publications, education. So if you're looking for answers to a question like what is, you know, forest degradation or what are real-time alerts, then usually there will be a Global Forest Watch blog on it somewhere or an academic article. And you can usually access the data sets directly either through an API if you're a software company, or you can access them through a website or a user interface if you're just exploring from the business side. So just as a quick run through, right, this is kind of one of our traditional flagship products, which is the Global Forest Loss, which is where basically any pixel for any year since the year 2000, you can locate if there was a deforestation in that 30-meter pixel anywhere in the world. Then we also do a lot of analysis on the secondary side of that to do kind of, well, what's causing those deforestations? You know, is it wildfires in North America, soybeans and livestock in Latin America, palm oil in Southeast Asia, or again, fires and in Russia and Central Asia, right? It's not always deforestation, but we also provide a lot of kind of technical resources to be able to understand the difference between, well, how do I separate what's a deforestation from, say, a natural forest fire, and how does that intersect with my supply chain? So we also have secondary products that would tell you what's the driver in that location. And I think relevant to this call, we have a product called the Spatial Database of Planted Trees, which is kind of a global compilation of different agroforestry plantations. That started out very focused on palm mills, but it includes a lot of rubber and eucalyptus and timber concessions now. So oftentimes that's used even by private service providers as a way to filter, you know, this isn't a natural rainforest like the Amazon. This is actually just a timber concession someone had developed and they're harvesting timber from it. So that's another useful resource we kind of provide guidance on, is what is a forest and when does it count as deforestation, as opposed to this is a, you know, rotational timber clearance for a cultivated land concession. And just to give you an idea of the scope and scale, like I said, we work across public, private, NGO, journalists, and you know, corporate supply chain. So we have quite a global user base. And then, as I alluded to, because we're on a supply chain call, right, we also have some kind of customized tools which are more tailored for supply chain actors. So the globalforestwatch.org takes you to our kind of general open data catalog and set of intellectual or user technical resources. But then we have another platform called Global Forest Watch Pro, which we developed for basically the large agribusiness and traders. So, Olam, Cargill, Sime Darby, ADM, the ABCD commodity companies, or major brands, consumer-facing brands like Kraft or Mars. I checked, and we don't have any major rubber companies, so I don't think Firestone is on there, but it's just to give you an idea. The difference with that tool, the GFW Pro tool, is that it's set up for you to put your own supply chain data in. So the open flagship one, right? You can get all these data sets and you can find general kind of analyses, but a lot of supply chain companies will have their own private data. This is where my farms and factories are. And then they have slightly more tailored analysis needs. So the GFW Pro tool kind of takes the data sets which are relevant for something like EUDR, and then you would upload your own supplier locations. You'd analyze them with, say, an EUDR analysis or a general deforestation analysis. And then you can get some packaged results that you could share across the supply chain, either as a PDF or as an Excel report. And to give you an idea, these are kind of the data sets that we've pulled and put in that we think are of relevance to different commercial supply chains. So a lot are on, where is forest and where are we losing forest? What's the risk? We have real-time alerting systems that can give you an indication of the deforestation on a kind of monthly basis instead of waiting a year at a time. That's another kind of crucial thing if you're up against, you need to know in real time. And then a number of what I'd call kind of secondary but important, like is it in a national park? Is it in an indigenous or protected community? And then those get packaged into these reports. So if you uploaded your list of polygons for where the farms are, then you could say, give me the post-2020 risk assessment. And I'll use that as my data in my due diligence report to say, look, I ran an analysis on these farms where I got my rubber tapping input from, and none of them seem to have any positive risk flags on them. So I think that it's a pretty good supply chain. And, we kind of iterate these with our customers. So we're usually in a kind of continuous improvement to customize them for what people need, not just for EUDR, but also there's, additional regulations coming up in California or Canada, Brazil's national forest laws, Indonesia's. So we have kind of a variety there of uses. And then this is just to give you an idea of the sort of, high or low risk or, everything is happy green kind of reports that we do, depending on your farm locations, that hopefully your supplier would have stored as, they know where their product is coming from. Now, very few supply chains really have that, but I think because of the EUDR passage, a lot of companies have now rapidly scrambled to get as much upstream sourcing data as they can. And that's basically what WRI has offered in this space. So we didn't help write it, luckily, but we did influence it in the direction of what's credible science. And then we've tried as much as possible to create open data and tools so that basically anyone can do this if they have the time to get through it. But we also support a lot of secondary service providers, private sector partnerships. So we are kind of an open buffet of support for both the public sector and the private sector, which is one reason we try to keep ourselves, a little bit behind innovation, but more on the end of the credible and careful. So usually once we put something out, it usually stands up to time, even if it gets criticized. So with that, I'll try to hand back as much time as I can. And if you have additional questions, you can feel free to reach out, and I'll make sure, Enrico has the slide deck so that these links and resources, you can look at them in your own time, as I'm sure you want to.
Yeah, perfect, Ben. Thank you very much for the presentation, detailed presentation also. And I was very surprised about the deforestation map, which is also terrifying, by the way. So thank you very much. I have some questions, but maybe first some questions from the people attending. You can put your question in the chat, or you can unmute. Sometimes it takes some time to. In the meantime, I have a burning question myself. I was actually curious. You hear a lot of decarbonization, or reforestation projects where you can sponsor and you can buy a tree with every product that you buy. When does a forest become a forest again? Because you mentioned there's a definition of a forest, but if I want to replant a whole forest, it takes some time. How do you count that?
Well, my first best advice would say that, you're doing a good thing if you're trying to plant trees, but it's also the even better thing you can do is not clear them in the first place because it takes a long time for a tree to grow.
Sure.
So in that sense, do is actually follow the regulation and stop cutting. First do no harm, which I think is a good part of the regulation. But I know what you're talking about, and restoration and reforestation are kind of, I think they're very attractive to people because for some reason it feels better than just not cutting things down, which doesn't it for some reason it doesn't excite people the same way as creating something new. So um, those definitions, I think they have this like time cutoff associated with them, but there isn't like one scientific truth to that. There is a standard called the accountability framework, and there are some others like the Brazilian National Forest Law that I'm fairly familiar with. And for them, sometimes it's about how you are using the land, even. So we have active research on this because a lot of people are asking this question now in, like areas around the Amazon where they want to put a buffer to protect it, or in Southeast Asia, you have land that was cleared, but it's not being used. So sometimes it depends on, well, are people using that land for anything? So the accountability framework would tell you if the forest animals and the ecosystem are still kind of doing their thing there, then it's still natural. Like, you might cut down the trees in the forest, but that also happens naturally. Like if there's a windstorm, right, you would have trees that fall that are old. And then you have a kind of secondary regrowth that happens. So just because the trees fell down doesn't mean it's not forest. That happens all the time in forests.
Yeah.
It's the fact that people aren't using that to build condominiums or to produce soybeans. So there's an element of how are you using the land. If the land is still not being used for anything and it's still being used by plants and animals for their natural processes, then you could just say it's forest how it is. It doesn't matter how high the trees are. It gets a little bit gray when maybe you were using that land and then you stopped using it. And that's kind of part of where we work with industry partnerships like this one, or accountability framework is like one of the principal ones where we ask this question with companies and NGOs, which is like, well, if I was using that land, but I've stopped, should I get a tax concession to turn it back to nature, like rewilding? And there's not like hard standards for that. Like when does it become nature again?
Yeah.
So I would guess the real answer to your question is like, if you're going down a project like that, you want to do an impact assessment that asks this question with the local partners, right? Like what's the local government going to say about it, or the local regulators and whoever the investors are? Because if you're doing it for carbon credits, maybe you have a different logic than if you're doing it to support a river and support nature coming back, where maybe you don't care about the cutoff date. You're just saying, look, we are putting the riverbanks back. It doesn't really matter what year. Not a great answer, but like an economist, it depends.
It's complex. I understand.
Yeah.
We have some questions also from the crowd. Heather, is the GFWP up and working, and is it aligned well to EUDR for businesses for use now?
Yeah, I think if you mean the Global Forest Watch Pro platform. Yeah, it was up before the EUDR, but it's let's say we refreshed it and adapted it to the EUDR requirements. So this is where a lot of people have questions about forest definition or what data set to use. The regulation says, it advises as a guiding light, use the FAO definition and use any data set you think is good. So we have basically all the data sets in GFW Pro. So we often have this conversation about, should I use the EU data set or the Global Forest Watch data set? And for the Pro platform, we do a couple things. One is we make sure they're all Creative Commons licensed, so the data can be used for commercial purposes. but also we include other people's data sets than our own. So we include the JRC map, which we co-develop with them on the research side. That's also available in our platforms. And then we also include the, for Brazil, the INPE national data set, because that has its own legal status in Brazil. So that's kind of like the easy way, is because we're open and agnostic, we don't have to pick and choose.
Yep.
But then I also know, because I've done a lot of these analysis, sometimes you say you get from one data set, it says there's deforestation, sometimes the other one doesn't. And then it really comes back to like know your suppliers, because you'll end up picking apart those ones one way or the other, and you'll be like, well, what's going on here? Usually there's a simple answer, like, you know, the data set hasn't been updated for 2024 yet because they released the update in July, but this other one was updated in May. Or, you know, this was a timber concession, so this data set calls it deforestation or tree loss, but it's been excluded from these results because these results have the planted trees filter on it. It's things like that. But usually if there isn't any deforestation in your supply chain, you'll be able to find that result one way or the other. So the best advice I've seen given is like, just make sure you're doing something. You know, like worrying about having the best data set is less important than, do you actually know where your product is coming from, which is usually like step one before you worry about these remote sensing ones. And then, you know, if you're getting to the level where you're like, no, I think it was on the other side of the farmer's like land management control zone, then you're probably already better than 90% of the due diligence that's being done. So, you know, have confidence to start is usually the move. But yeah, Pro is up, so is Flagship, and we also support service providers. So if you're working with a tech service provider that's doing this, you know, we also work with those companies to help them get the customized data reports they need, because we're not really like a service provider in that sense. Like, we provide access to data and we provide technical expertise, but we're not hand-holding and chasing 1,000 customers to make sure they succeed.
Makes sense. Thank you for the very broad explanation. Heather, yes?
I was just saying thank you very much. It was good information.
Perfect, thank you. And another question from Stefano. Stefano, EU Forest Observatory versus Global Forest Watch. Can you explain differences in use and strengths and compare the two tools? And try to be a little bit concise, because we do have 3 other presentations, of course.
Okay, the difference between Global Forest Watch and Global Forest Watch Pro?
EU Forest Observatory.
Okay. So basically both are big research data centers that crunch the numbers and then they publish a global data set. Now, JRC uses European Space Agency satellites, WRI uses NASA satellites, and then we also both produce products that use both satellites, just to make things even more confusing. And we both share data with each other to improve each other's products. So it's kind of like a value chain thing. You know, you have primary data, and then you have blended data, and then you have secondary consumer data. So we're both tangled up with each other, but they're fairly aligned right now because because of EUDR, we've shared more and more collaboration to make sure, okay, we're removing these areas because we think they're timber, and then, you know, EU will pick that up. And then if EU picks up something, WRI has a regular quarterly or biannual meeting with them to say, hey, we're going to change our model in this way. So are you guys taking account of that? So some of it is to do with research funding, and some of it is to do with data access and kind of institutional support, which is important these days. You know, some of my NASA colleagues, they're not quite as supported as they were 6 months ago. So I think both products are very capable and comparable these days, and usually we are, you know, chasing ahead in parallel. Like, we're helping each other get ahead, but also like, okay, we've got our annual release, now you've got yours. How do we coordinate them? How do we inform? So you're usually good if you go with either one.
Perfect. And I think that answers the questions also. Perfect. Last question from the crowd, and thank you for your very complete answers also. From Sarvan, mostly as an ISCC consultant, I use the GRASS tool when I look into land use. Could GFW be a good addition to the GRASS tool, or is the purpose too different?
I can't recall all the technical details of GRASS, although I've looked at the platform a couple times. So usually you can figure out from the input data sets kind of what will and won't be covered. And for most of them, like if it's coming from Airbus or Planet, I don't remember where grass gets its primary data from. Usually you will find some overlap in the upstream like input data sets, and that will be part of your answer. But from what I recall, this is kind of broadly back to like if you're using something, that's better than using nothing is the most important message for due diligence. So I think the reason I can't give you like a straight yes or no, or here's the difference is one, I haven't looked at grass for a couple of years because it hasn't been my responsibility to since like 2019 or something. But probably they have been chasing quality like everyone else around EUDR. So I know them enough to know you're probably on good ground, but you can always like when we work with FAO and ESA and JRC, we call it convergence of evidence, where we kind of compare everyone's results. And if everyone is saying there's a problem there, you're pretty sure there's a problem there. If 2 or 3 sources are saying it, then maybe you investigate and figure out why.
Okay, perfect. Hey, thank you very much, Ben, again for the presentation and also for the clear answers. The meeting will be recorded, but please also if you can share the presentation slides, that would be amazing, so we can share it, the handout with the people here. So thanks also from the crowd, and then I think it's time to move to the next speaker, Stefano from GPSNR Global Platform of Sustainable Natural Rubber. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for being here. And we're in the loop now. I'm not super sure what that causes. But thank you very much for being here. You can take over the screen by sharing yours. And I also saw that you were already in sustainable sourcing from the palm oil roundtable, and now for already more than 6 years at GPSNR working on natural rubber supply chains. So thank you very much for your work, first of all, and for being a speaker today.
Thank you, Enrico, and thank you for the invitation. I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it perfectly. So you have about 15 minutes if you can try to keep that up.
Yes,
that would be
I'll
amazing.
try and be quick. Also, I think there's so much to say in terms of EUDR and natural rubber that I really have only a few slides, and I'm going to touch on a few topics, and I hope that we can do most of this conversation within the Q&A so that I can respond to the things that actually matter to people that are listening and not to what I think it's important and maybe miss the target completely. So thank you again for the invitation. And as I start, yes, I'm representing today the Global Platform for Sustainable Natural Rubber. We are an organization that is based out of mostly out of Singapore in terms of the secretariat, but with members that are coming from across the globe. It was initially set up 6 years ago with an initiative from 10 tire makers, that brought up then there are several players in the natural rubber value chain. And today it includes more than 400 members that span from smallholders and producers, processors, and traders of natural rubber, also manufacturers and other natural rubber makers of buyers, as well as end users of natural rubber, and of course also civil society. And all these people have come together in the past years to understand how to make natural rubber more sustainable with a look at equity and fairness in the value chain. So my first message here is that this was started 6 years ago. Many companies in natural rubber sector are working on sustainability. And when we look at legislation like the EUDR, it's important to understand that this is part of that work, and it's not all of that work, because that's one thing that scares me a bit about legislation, is that we can have a tunnel vision on a EUDR as has happened in the last 2 years and forget that sustainability is actually much broader. And it's something that stays, and it's important if we want to consider the long-term resilience of our value chains. It's not just a good to have, it's a must-have for businesses to ensure that we will continue to have natural rubber coming into our value chain in the future. And that's where I think EUDR and GPSNR have aligned from the beginning in a way. And I'll explain a bit more later what we think are some of the challenges, and how the platform has responded to that. But before into this, I'd like to explain to you what GPSNR is actually doing. Yeah, we are quite a young organization. We have gone through several rounds of discussions with our members to basically come up with a theory of change and how we want to tackle sustainability in the value chain. But to be very, very concise, there's two streams of work that we're mostly tackling now. Yeah, one is a stream of work in assurance. Yeah, and by assurance we mean how can we make companies make claims or make statements about what they're doing in their sustainability efforts that are verifiable. Yeah, and how can these statements actually lead to some impact on the ground? Yeah, and this process is something that we're finalizing this year. It will be coming mandatory as of 2027. Yeah, with the initiation of a process that will include third-party audits on due diligence for our members that are based on a charter that is what we call our policy framework for GPSNR, which is basically something that the companies, when they come and become members of GPSNR, they align to, and it's a set of environmental, social, and governance objectives, impact objectives that the companies put on themselves. Yeah. So from 2027, we're going to start third-party verifying this due diligence process, and this is something that is quite, I would say, complementary, if not aligned, with the EUDR process, but just a little bit broader in scope sometimes. Yeah. Another big part of what we do in GPSNR is capacity building. So basically, we collect funds from the industry, from downstream. Yeah, and from this year, this is actually based on a shared investment formula. So each company needs to contribute based on their consumption of natural rubber for the full consumption of the company. Put this money into a fund or have projects, yeah, that offset this contribution that are done directly by the company, yeah. And we're trying to grow this commitment in the next few years. Yeah, this is something that we're working on at the moment. For the time being, this is about $4 million USD per year from the companies that are going to support smallholders, and we've already had projects in many countries, including Thailand, Cote d'Ivoire, Indonesia, on work like agroforestry, for example, or good agricultural practices or disease fighting and many other projects. Yeah. When it comes to the EUDR, from the beginning, GPSNR has also been trying to be part of the public consultation. Yeah, of course, similarly, I guess, to what the WRI was mentioning before, we didn't design the regulation. We also get sometimes confused to be in this role. This didn't come from us. It came from the European Union, the Commission, and the Parliament and the Council, of course. And we have been part, though, of the EU deforestation, multi-stakeholder deforestation task force, yeah, similar as WRI. And so from the beginning, we shared our concern on the fact that the EUDR has a good intent, but a big risk in rubber for the EUDR is the unwanted exclusion of smallholders. Yeah, and I think there's a great point actually in the legislation, yeah, on Article 21, if I'm not mistaken, which speaks about the need for the EU to give financial and technical support to smallholders to be able to comply with the regulation. And I think while other parts of the regulation are actually quite well implemented, this part of technical and financial support is still quite gray, yeah, and this is where we hope also through GPSNR to be able to support. This said, there's quite a few pieces of work that we've done with our members that are linked to the EUDR. I mentioned before that from 2027, we're going to have audits for GPSNR. One thing we are doing is we're working on an EUDR module, which is currently underway. And this is basically highlighting aspects within the due diligence approach of GPSNR that are actually aligned with what the EUDR requirements are. Yeah, so it was mentioned also before, EUDR has a big part on data collection, so traceability, mapping the farms, that's very important. But the due diligence part is what is really mostly difficult, yeah, especially in natural rubber and when you're looking at the smallholders, yeah. When I look at our membership, most of our members seem quite confident now on the level of mapping that they have for smallholders, yeah, the information that they have on the polygons, for example. But the work on due diligence is still very, very complicated, I would say. Yeah, things change very often. It's very difficult to understand also because there's not clear guidance from the EU on what is the scope and the exact requirement. It's a due diligence approach after all. Yeah, it's not a certification approach that the EU is implementing. So there's quite a bit of spread, I would say, in how the companies are approaching this due diligence system. And this is where we have worked, for example, in GPSNR to provide our members with some legality studies. Yeah, we have produced this for Indonesia, for Thailand, for Cote d'Ivoire, and for Malaysia. Sorry, for Vietnam and for Malaysia, not for Cote d'Ivoire. But there is also one for Cote d'Ivoire that has been done by the same organization, but with funding from the EU that is public, actually, now. Yeah, and the one for Ghana, I think, is also coming out. You can find it in the European Forest Institute website. Yeah, and the European Forest Institute is the same organization that we have worked with to produce the studies for the other 4 countries that are available to GPSNR members. We have also worked on an operational guidance as GPSNR. So we have this also available to our members. Yeah, this is something that came up largely from an intention from the manufacturers within GPSNR to create a bit of a level playing field on how EUDR requirements are operationalized. Yeah, so what does it mean to segregate, how to do this, yeah, how to look at legality, how to look at other aspects. Yeah. And in GPSNR, we also believe strongly that regulatory compliance is anyways principle one of our policy framework, so to what companies commit to. Yeah, so I think EUDR and any other regulation is something that you can expect from GPSNR members because they have companies' policies that also require them to look into this in the countries where they're sourcing from, and of course it's a legal requirement nonetheless. Yeah. So while we look at the EUDR, I mentioned before, I think a big risk in natural rubber is to inadvertently exclude smallholders that might even be compliant with the EUDR requirement, but might be too difficult to assess. Yeah, so we have countries. An example is Indonesia, for example, where supply chain is very complex. You have up to 7 steps from the factories that are processing the rubber to the smallholder that is producing it, and sometimes if addressing the due diligence part or the mapping of the smallholders is too complicated because they're too disconnected, it might be easier for a processor or for a trader to exclude these smallholders. Yeah, and this is where I think really the challenge can be in terms of the EUDR implementation. Also because if the scope of this regulation is to lower the deforestation rate, then the worst thing that you can do is to take away the bread from the plate of a smallholder, because what they will do to put that bread back on the plate is to open another hectare of land to produce cassava or to produce some subsistence crops. Yeah, so I think where we really stand the chance to fight this is not so much with a cane or with a stick, yeah, but to look at how we can use carrots. And this is what I was thinking about and explaining before. Yeah, this is something we have set up in GPSNR. We are just starting this year, but we hope more companies can come in, become members, contribute on this. So manufacturers are required now to have this contribution into this fund, that we're going to be using for smallholder resilience and nature conservation. And we hope that through solid monitoring and evaluation and research and innovation of these projects, smallholder impacting projects, that in the future we can have something that is really transformational. Yeah. And I'll stop there. As I mentioned before, I wanted to be quick. I hope I managed. But I'm happy to dive deeper in any aspects related to the EUDR or to the complexities in the value chain, whatever is most of interest to the audience. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And thank you again, Enrico.
Perfect. No, thank you. The thanks is all mine for your time and also presentation. I think it would be great to visit the natural rubber plantation for everybody involved to understand what it means, actually, what it looks like in real life. And I was actually talking to a good contact of ours who actually just came back from Indonesia as a Dutch person, quite impressed about the working conditions in such plantations, positively and negatively, but definitely impressed. Are there any questions from the crowd from this presentation? You can raise your hand or put the question in the chat. We have a question from Jan. Are smallholders in this method in your support getting better by the EUDR?
Okay, I can see two ways of responding to this. Yeah, we are seeing that EUDR in some contexts is already driving premiums to smallholders. Yeah, so this is based on companies' relationship. This is not something that's driven by GPSNR, of course, but we do think that there's an opportunity for this regulation to have an impact on a price of a commodity that has been consistently in the past, I would say 10 to 15 years, below the production cost in certain countries. Yeah, and we are seeing smallholders, in many jurisdictions, in many countries, moving away from rubber and switching to other crops. And I think this is a challenge for deforestation actually in the future, because at a certain point when the supply and demand balance will flip, we will see smallholders wanting to plant rubber again, and we've seen what happened in 2010, 2011 with this when this happened. Yeah, in the Mekong region in West Africa, yeah, we had a lot of deforestation. So we hope that we're not going to get there, and I think having some price support in this it's potentially helpful. Yeah, so having some link between a sustainable production and a price reward, I think, is something that is happening. But it's not the full equation. Yeah, so I think where we can come in is also to work as industries to support programs that are driving change from the bottom up. Yeah, so not necessarily for smallholders that are already, say, compliant, or for farms that are already at a level or reaching a bar, which could be the EUDR bar or a certification bar, but also for those that maybe haven't done too bad and can be improving. Yeah, and this is where I think the work of GPSNR can really make a difference. Of course, we're just starting, so you can imagine, I don't think $4 million a year of investment is industry transformational, but the objective and what we're working on is to really scale this up and to move from projects to programs, yeah, and to have this in countries in collaboration with governments. We're already doing this, of course, in collaboration with governments in the countries where we're operating, and we hope to scale this up. And I do think that this is going to make smallholders get better. I was in a call with 3 smallholders, one with Cote d'Ivoire, one from Thailand, and one from Indonesia, just 1 hour and a half before joining this call. And they're very excited about this opportunity, about seeing the supply chain support. Yeah, it's not just about it's a lot about the price, but it's also about the feeling of there's a supply chain supporting us continuing to produce rubber if we want them to smallholders to continue being rubber producers. Yeah, so I do think that we can make a dent. Yeah.
Yeah. No, very nice. So you think that the premium price is also translated down to the smallholder in the end? Because of course you see a lot with premium prices that they stick to the importers, let's say, but does it also happen for the smallholders?
Yeah, I do think, I mean, and this I'm speaking from anecdotal and conversations, yeah, and I'm not gonna point at a general rule, because I don't think it exists. But I would say, especially where supply chain are shorter, yes, it is happening. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, if there's no other questions, or please reach out to Stefano after this meeting. Thank you very much for your time again. And if you can share the slides, although Samir, it would still help for inspirational and your contact details. So thanks again. And then we move on to the next presentation of today, which will be from Weber&Schaer. I'll try to share my screen again. There you go. And this is the presentation from Anna. Anna, thank you for being with us. and you're working on the sustainability department from Weber, quite a significant importer company in Germany, I think, right?
Right. Thank you for the invitation. I hope I'm not coughing. I'm a little bit, I have a cold, but I will give my best to speak loud enough for you. My name is Anne Domin, and I work for Weber&Schaer in the sustainability department for natural rubber. I'm the helping hand of Hans Evers, who promotes and develops the sustainability projects in our department for several years. I'm also involved in topics such as carbon footprint and sustainability reporting for the role group. I will now start by talking about Weber&Schaer a little bit and then come to our sustainability topics from the last years. Then I will move on to the EUDR obligations for importers. And at the end, I will talk about the challenges we face with the EUDR. Weber&Schaer was established in 1844 in Hamburg as a family-owned trading house and is now led by the fifth generation. The Weber&Schaer Group, with its subsidiaries Polymer Service GmbH and Braun Battenberg, has more than 100 employees. In partnership with internationally renowned producers, we organize the import and the sale of high-grade raw materials for industrial application in the areas of rubber, plastics, and adhesives. The Weber&Schaer Group combines a wide range of expertise. We have a network all across Europe and supplying our customers with quality products from all around the world. Through full-sized storage facilities located in the major European transport hubs, we can deliver our customers on time. We respond promptly with solutions tailored to the specific needs of our customers, and we engage our producers and customers in dialogue to continually improve the performance of our products. Our chemists and chemical engineers have over 100 years of collective experience in different areas of the rubber supply chain. Our core capabilities include everything from customized, needs-based advice on the choice of raw materials for each application to the development of recipes and formulations and targeted support with regulatory matter. We have our own laboratory and technical center equipped with the latest technology. What we do in part of sustainability. For many years, the concept of sustainability has been the common thread running through every level of our company and the work we do. I've put some project from over past 20 years in this overview for you. And for example, we started generating our own energy for our storage buildings with photovoltaic and investing in the optimization of energy consumption at all our locations. We have also adapted our workflows to conserve resources. Sustainable sourcing and the promotion of the people involved in our rubber supply chains have been important topics for us already for a long time, which why FSC and PSC certification were an important way to forward, and it allows us to supply raw materials from a number of different sources certified by the Forest Stewardship Council and the program for the endorsement of forest certification schemes. Weber&Schaer is also certified to Quality Management System ISO 9001 and has a gold medal sustainability rating from EcoVadis. Weber&Schaer is also a member of the Global Platform for Sustainable Natural Rubber. And we are not only trying to improve ourselves in the field of sustainability, we also help our partners to progress. by offering joint projects with suppliers to strengthen and contribute to sustainable development within the supply chain, and or simply help them to start sourcing more sustainable certified raw materials. Now I come to the EUDR topics. Requirements for placing natural rubber on the EU market. The EUDR requires that to import a product in the EU, the market participant must check whether the laws of the country of production have been followed, like human rights, environmental rights, labor rights, etc., as you can see here now in the overview. And also the land use rights needs to exist. It must be ensured that no forest areas have been converted into plantations or agricultural areas for these products after December 30, 2020. DDS must be created in the information system that contains the geolocation data of the areas on which a product was harvested, planted, or raised, together with the information on quantity, country of manufacture, and production. The general due diligence obligations of market participants are the information requirements, risk assessment, risk mitigation, and the due diligence statement in the information system. The depth of the obligations depends on the classification in the benchmarking system from the country of origin. We have to collect data and information which are generally part of the delivery, such as addresses, quantities, etc., and also needs to check the compliance with the law in the country of manufacture, as well as the absence of deforestation. For all countries that are not low risk according to the benchmarking system, we have to do risk assessment and risk mitigation. For the risk assessment, we have to check presence of forests, we have to check if indigenous groups are affected through our operations, and check if there are claims from indigenous groups. We need to check the forest degradation rate and the general situation in the countries. The complexity of our supply chain, risk of circumvention, of the land, and any other relevant information. When there are concerns, we have to do risk mitigation, collect additional documents and verification through surveys and audits. We will have to support the producers, in particular the smallholders, through capacity building and investments. In the due diligence statement, we have to provide the data we already collected and submit the statement in the information system. The rubber supply chain can be very complex. Between the factory resource and the smallholder can be several dealers. As we need to ensure that the EUDR rubber is not mixed with non-EUDR rubber, we need the whole supply chain to be traceable and compliant. We already audited most of our suppliers with all the factories and have done risk mitigation in investing and helping building up systems for documentation of the supply chain and ensuring the separation of goods. Now we come to the benchmarking system. The benchmarking system was published on 22nd May this year and resulted some changes for the market participants. Those who purchase commodities from low-risk countries have to do simplified due diligence. You only need to collect all information requirements as well as a statement in the information system. In case of standard risk and high-risk countries, the obligation to assess and mitigate risk remains the same. The risk classification defines the level of compliance checks that competent authorities of the member states will have to make. 1% of the DDS from low-risk countries will be checked, 3% for standard risk countries, and 9% of the DDS from high-risk countries. We were facing some challenges during the implementation of the EUDR. The integration in our internal processes were sometimes challenging. We started by setting up a standard operation procedure and planning all things that we have to do to fulfill the due diligence. The most important points for us were to contact and visit our suppliers. It has been a few years now, and of course not all natural rubber suppliers want to work under EUDR. We audited the suppliers and sometimes have to go several times to ensure that the requirements can be met. The suppliers must also need to establish systems. All smallholders need to be mapped and the material flow must be able to determine. Building up systems is expensive and time-consuming. We were helping our suppliers building up these systems and also have contributed costs. The data flow between suppliers to us in our internal system and to the customers must function seamlessly. Many different systems are used to collect data, and every customer has own expectations how to receive information and how detailed information needs to be. We are in constant dialogue with our customers to answer open questions about the EUDR and how we will transfer the data. Due to the complex supply chains in the rubber business, every geolocation batch can be different and do not come from the same plot of land when you're not only sourcing from plantations. We have to do a lot of DDS in the information system. To make an annual DDS is not possible for us. In addition to work with our suppliers, we of course also must be evaluated by our customers. We are not only importer, we are sometimes just part of the supply chain before the goods enter the EU through the customers. So we need to be audited and verified too. If we are not the importer, the customer may want to visit the supplier of the raw material in the country of production. We also see the challenges for the downstream supply chain. Not only we have our challenges, and as we give advice to our customers as well as possible, we see their challenges too. The biggest difficulties are knowledge gaps and the understanding of the obligations as a downstream supplier. For example, what information do I have to obtain? Do I have to check and collect geodata when I'm not importer, and so on? All these questions are answered in detail in the FAQ that was provided by the EU, and I really can recommend it to you. The downstream supply chain also needs to develop their systems. For example, accurate tracking of raw materials during production to reference numbers and verification numbers. They need to get familiarized with the tracer systems and their roles in the system. The SME have to set up systems to collect reference numbers and verification numbers to all affected deliveries they receive and hand out the numbers to their downstream suppliers. On this slide, I put some helpful links. Maybe you want to get the PowerPoint presentation handed out later. And now I have to say thank you, and I hope that I can give you a little insight.
Perfect, Anna. Thank you very much for the presentation. Exactly within 15 minutes. I don't know if you clocked yourself. And also thanking for doing it even though you had the cold. But no problems at all with the presentation. I have plenty of questions, but please, from the crowd, if there's anybody that wants to go first, you can either raise your hand or put your question in the chat. And if not, I was very curious, how many people did you have on the floor, basically in these companies where you source natural rubber, to do all these audits?
Yeah, our team has to do all the visits. I think we are 8 people, and they were a lot of traveling the last years. And also the sustainability department was traveling a lot and still is traveling a lot. We also have to combine the travels. When we travel one country, we combine the audits from the suppliers of the country. And yeah, it's very time consuming, but it needs to be done because you can only see the problems when you're visiting the suppliers, and you can only check their system when you visit them and see the problems and see what you still have to do, and if you have to again go there and do more checks.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So did your sustainability team grow also, or did you hire new people to do this?
No, we didn't hire more people, but our trading team was very involved with the topic. Not only the sustainability department was traveling, also the whole trading group.
I can imagine. Yeah, well, Jan, question.
Yes, a basic, simple question maybe after the previous presentation and the next. Is there a specific software or company that you use for checking on these plots where it's coming from? The
We
data,
have,
the geographic data?
Sometimes the producers have their own companies to collect the geodata and building up systems, but we have also a partner, and the partner maps and helps us building up systems for several suppliers. So yeah, we have a partner that we know very good, and where we share the costs with the suppliers. But sometimes the suppliers use their own systems and use their own chosen companies to do all these mapping and checking of legal requirements of smallholders, because you always have to check the land use rights of all these smallholders.
Yeah,
okay,
well,
thank you.
you need to be able to read a lot of languages, I suppose, in that case, to be on the ground. Also, a question from my side. So do you still trade non-EUDR natural rubber?
Yes, we also
Yeah.
still trade non-EUDR rubber, but it's only possible for companies who will not make goods that enter the EU. Because when, for example, a glove company in Asia makes gloves and then wants to trade the gloves that will enter the EU market, they have to be compliant too. So that's an example where we are not only importer, we are part of the supply chain. It's very different from case to case, and yeah, we have very interesting cases.
I can imagine also. May I ask the difference of premium between EUDR compliant and not?
Yeah, there's a premium, but it's we have to pay the premium to buy the to get the raw material. We already have to pay a premium to EUDR material.
Yeah, no, makes sense. But could you give an estimate of natural rubber imported to Europe? If you're buying natural rubber polymer, what's the price difference between EUDR compliant and not? Or is it hard to say? Is it 20%? Is it 100%?
I'm not very sure. Cedric, can you please step
Yeah,
in?
sure. Hello, everyone. Just stepping in, I'm working together with Anne more in the selling side, I would say. So for the time being, that's true that this premium is varying from one producer to the other. So that's very difficult to give an accurate number, but to give you just a range, it's between 15 and 250 or even 300 euro per ton. So we are among this price range to pay this premium, but it could still evolve the next months or weeks to come. So let's see how it develops, because last year we saw that this premium was far higher than this one of today. So it tends to homogenize from all the producers, but we are still not on a very homogeneous picture.
So it really depends. Thank you for that answer. So between 50 and 300 extra.
15 and 300. That could
Wow.
be
Wonderful.
the today's picture.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that addition, because in the end, of course, it's a lot of extra work, so it all definitely makes sense. But it's just curious indeed what it affects the supply chain, financially speaking. Thank you very much for that addition. If there's no other questions, then I would like to thank you again, even on your day with the call, for having the complete presentation. And that would be great if you can share that afterwards also. Well, we have a very basically this was a brief question from Evan. Can you quote a rough percentage increase to the cost of natural rubber polymer? So the 15 to 300, it depends on the natural polymer price, what that percentage is.
Yeah, absolutely. It really depends from one grade to the other. You can really have different. So if you are talking about TSR10 or RSS 1, it's completely different price level. So basically the SICOM as of today is around 160. As you can see, it's publicly available. You know, it's the natural rubber is quoted on the stock exchange, so you can have a look at SICOM or at Tokyo, or you have different places where you can really see on a daily basis the price of natural rubber. But the SICOM is around $160 per kg, so it gives you an idea about the percentage.
Yeah, but do you give daily prices on the price of the EUDR premium?
Yeah. It's
on the premium also?
No, normally the premium should be, of course, something we expect to be constant all over the year. But since for the timing, the overview is not clear. So let's see what the future will tell us.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Paul, you can also get in touch with Cedric directly.
Absolutely.
So thanks for the question. Without further ado, let's jump to the last presentation of the day. And Harry, thank you very much for being with us. Also an early member of the platform with EUDR compliant software. So you can take over the screen by presenting yours.
Well, yeah, thanks, Enrico. Let me see what the best way to do this is here. All right, I'm working on just one screen today, so bear with me and interrupt me if you've got any questions or anything. First of all, thanks for having me. It's always great to be a fly on the wall of the circular rubber conversations. I learn a lot about rubber, and I learn that I don't know a lot about rubber as well. So hopefully I can teach you a bit about what I do as a business over at OpenAtlas and what we do. I don't think I need to tell you about the EUDR because we've had a few fantastic presentations on that, which all for the most part, I think, I learned a few things there, and EUDR is my life. So they were very comprehensive, and I really appreciate that. Instead, today, what I'm going to talk about is, a little bit more real for you all, which is, what is the burden of the EUDR on you as a business? I'm going to start conceptually. If we want to follow up with any, deep dives on specifics, we can do that in the Q&A, or you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn. But what's the modern compliance burden today? Before I founded OpenAtlas, I was working, I don't want to say in another life, but about 5 or 6 years ago in a kind of risk and compliance role. And I was right at the middle of this matrix here. You're required to deal with different jurisdictions, different inputs from people, costs associated with that, sometimes paper information, other times digital, spoken conversations with suppliers. All of this stuff is costly, time-consuming and inefficient. And with all the new EU regulations and global regulations around ESG, environmental, etc., that's only kind of getting worse, which is the bad news. So, taking it out of the abstract and speaking a little bit concretely, what does this inefficiency look like in the context of deforestation? It's the same thing. You're talking with suppliers, you reply via email, they send you Excel spreadsheets, or they send you photocopied scans, they send you strange configurations of latitudes and longitudes to represent plots around the world. And ultimately, per a real conversation with one of our customers before they started working with us, their estimate was it would take them 2 hours to check a deforestation risk for a single shipment. Now, I think that's already hugely ambitious, but all things considered, it's a good baseline because it speaks towards, you as businesses, the challenges that you face in the compliance realm. That is, it's taken up time, it's costing money, and it's terribly inefficient, and it's only getting worse. So where does OpenAtlas step in here? So the good news I always tell to people is amongst this melee of challenges and costs and time consumingness, there are solutions that are entering the market with the pure goal of making life easy for you, right? EUDR is a headache. It requires a lot from businesses, but where possible, service providers like ourselves at OpenAtlas, we enter the market and we stake our neck on creating solutions that make life easier for you. So if EUDR is a challenge, if you're finding it time consuming, it's obscure what you have to do, do worry because there's a lot to be done, but don't worry to the extent that there are services out there and solutions that are built around making it easier. That example, 2 hours to check a deforestation risk assessment. It takes our solution to check, I think, a plot. We do, I think, 10,000 plots in less than 2 minutes at this stage. So this is even out of date. But the point here is what would take you and, a compliance person in your team or outsourcing it an age to do, we can do terribly efficiently. So how does this technology simplify EUDR due diligence for you guys? We had a great presentation at the beginning around, what is EUDR, all the challenges associated with it. And I think you would all agree there's a fair bit of complexity there, right? There's different data layers. How do you evaluate which data layer is the correct data layer? How do you know if one is good or bad? And ultimately, is it your job to have to do that? I would say no. It shouldn't be. You should focus on whatever your job is and leave everything else where possible to ourselves or, minimize the role or the burden on your own compliance personnel. So what does OpenAtlas do? I think a lot like the first presentation, we are a remote sensing service provider. So what that means is that we use satellite imagery, like you can see here, and we use satellite imagery and machine learning to monitor for deforestation around the world. Now, why I say that is, and why I use this as an example, is the infrastructure that we use in terms of satellite imagery is very dense. It's not just what the human eye can see, but it's also what the human eye can't see with respect to radar, LiDAR, all of these different modalities. And I could speak for an hour about what they represent and what they do, but ultimately what we do is we use all of this for an area of interest, to say a smallholder plot around the world, or 10,000 smallholder plots, or 20,000 smallholder plots. And we push this through machine learning algorithms to essentially monitor for deforestation risk. And as was explained at the beginning, this we do it a little bit differently. We don't run off a single data set, but we perform analysis on each area of interest as it's required. So instead of scanning the whole world once a year or once a month or something like this, we do an analysis such that at period X, let's say the EUDR cutoff date, and period Y, the harvest date, we take these two bookends and we use these as timestamps. And every single time a satellite revisits it in between those, we capture that satellite imagery and we perform the machine learning model analysis on it to determine where deforestation is occurring. And I always like to say this because it's kind of like a proverb or something, you know, how many trees are in a forest or how many trees need to be cut down for there to be deforestation? Fortunately, that question is no longer abstract, but the EU has defined what a forest is, what different types of forest is, what agricultural land use constitutes, and what deforestation constitutes. So using these as baselines, we've trained our solution exactly to the letter of the law of the EU. I think this is a real advantage of our solution, is we're not coming with a preconceived notion of what EUDR is or a technology built for a different definition. We've really built it from the ground up to the letter of the regulation. So as I say, between period X and period Y in 2020 up until today, that's about 100 or 150 different satellite revisits. We capture all of those. We look at what happens over time there. We perform land use model analysis on it. We reference different data sets like GFW, like the presentation at the beginning. So we capture that as well. And we ensemble all of these different things together to tell us where is deforestation occurring per the regulation as well. I think it's super cool. We could talk about this for ages, but I think the point that I'm trying to make here is we've developed a solution that's aimed at making your life easy, right? You provide us with areas of interest. This could be your suppliers. That could be one of them. It could be two of them. It could be 10,000, 200,000 of them. We perform this analysis on it and we provide back to you verifiable, adequately conclusive and verifiable evidence of what's happening on the ground. And then we also tell you high, medium or low risk, what's been happening there as well. Is there deforestation is there not deforestation? What we also do beyond just the deforestation analysis is, if you're familiar with the EUDR, which we all are a little bit now, it's not just deforestation, but also legality of sourcing as well, right? So that means we're performing checks on protected areas, Indigenous persons overlaps, all of these things that could contribute to insights on whether or not a plot of land is legal to source from or it's not. Now, we've developed our own protected area sites, which is incredibly comprehensive. It means that I've spent a lot of time, and the team has, speaking to different national bodies around where national parks are and all of this cool stuff. But the goal here is to create a solution and an output that de-risks your regulatory risk, right, around the EUDR. And we take that incredibly seriously in what I do. I think it was said earlier, you know, doing something is better than nothing. And I was thinking in my head, doing our thing is better than something. We really go to a great level of depth to minimize the risk here, minimize the cases that there are false positives and false negatives, you know, in situations there that puts suppliers exposed to the regulation. You can imagine if there's a false positive for deforestation, a smallholder supplier on the other side of the world has now been excluded from working with the EU, potentially, even if they haven't done anything wrong. So we really take it as a sort of corporate responsibility for us to develop the most accurate tool possible, such that these edge cases don't occur, or they occur in the rarest cases. And, you know, if we're unsure about anything, then we put it forward for further analysis as well, where we download additional satellite imagery and stuff like this. But conceptually, neural network enabled deforestation detection methodology. Sounds crazy. The goal here is just to be as accurate as possible. So what does this look like in reality? These are some of our older visualizations. I think if you were involved in the Circular Rubber seminar a while ago, you would have seen these. But what we have on the, let's have a look on the left here. This is a high risk plot. This is on the top row, we can see two satellite images. These are those bookends, the beginning and the end. It doesn't show you what's occurred in between because it gets a little confusing. But even from the satellite imagery, we can see, all right, something's occurring here. It looks like something's happening, but that's only as good as the verifiable evidence that you can attribute to it, right? So then we have the models that run over this to identify different types of forest, be they undisturbed, degraded, regrowth, planted forest. Each of these map to different outcomes under the regulation. And then what we can see is, yeah, there has been a lot of deforestation going on here. And our service would tell you that conclusively, that this is high risk, and that for the purposes of the EU, I wouldn't be using this plot because you will get into trouble. But let's have a look on the right-hand side here. This is a much more typical scenario. And I mean that truthfully, because what we can see, again, we have the satellite imagery on top. We've cropped out a little bit here automatically of cloud cover of these two bookends. Remember, there's 100 or 150 revisits between these two. And here's the model analysis. We can see planted forest occurring a lot here, which under the EU, we can deforest from a planted forest. That is legal logging. This is where it gets all complicated with forest definitions and yada, yada, yada. The important thing is you don't need to worry about that. At the end of the day, we tell you if it's high risk, low risk, or medium risk. This plot is actually medium risk. I lie to you. It's a medium risk plot. There's some evidence of deforestation. This is something that we would put forward for an additional review. The point that I'm trying to make here is, sure, this is complicated, right? You've got different types of forest. You've got satellite imagery that means one thing. How are you meant to interpret that? Our solution is built such that you don't need to worry about that as much as possible. There's evidence associated with each of our outputs, but there's also a high, medium, low risk score. So you can choose to double click, zoom in, check everything out in more detail, or you can defer to our methodology, which is transparent, and we have that for anyone that's working with us. We can go into that and you can see what's going on at that level. Again, the goal here is for us to make sure that this is getting easier for you guys, right? EUDR is a huge burden on your businesses. We're not trying to overstress you and your personnel or whoever's running your compliance with unnecessary information, but I'm really just trying to, synthesize it as much as possible, but give you all the tools if you need to follow up on that as well. So again, I know that we've been kind of talking a bunch today. I don't want to eat up all the time. The things that I want to stress here, guys, is that EUDR is a headache, depending on your relationship to it. Even if it's not, I'm sure it's a headache. My girlfriend thinks it's a headache, the amount that I talk about it. But essentially, it's going to be a burden for your business. Solutions like OpenAtlas exist with the pure goal of making those burdens less, right? And I think we heard earlier a couple of presentations about, how complex this can be. There are different data layers. How do you evaluate the JRC to the GFW, and which one of these things is correct, and is it most up to date? And then does it integrate with protected layers? All of this other stuff. We do that for you. Take that challenge off the table. Let us just do the analysis and let you get on with the business of doing your business. I had a couple other notes here as well. These are problems, better than something. Yeah. Don't be worrying about what's the best data set. I mean, that's a burden that I don't think you guys need to worry about. It's something that we focus on exclusively, and we optimize for that by ensembling a number of different ones together. And we're always iterating on this as well. So look, risk is an appetite. You can choose to do less. You can choose to do more. You can choose to do above the threshold or below the threshold. I think what we've created here is something that's trying to minimize that risk for you and your business. We're very good at it. We work with a lot of large businesses. I think the proof is in the pudding there. But if you have any questions, search for me on LinkedIn, send me an email directly if it's interesting. I'm, for my woes, I'm somewhat of an expert on EUDR nowadays. So as I always say, a quick 15-minute conversation with me could save you weeks of headache and worrying. So if that sounds interesting, get in touch. We can analyze your business's current situation and see where to take it from there. But yeah, thanks a lot.
Perfect. Harry, once again, thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm very curious if there's any questions from the crowd at the moment.
Come on, crowd. Hit me with questions.
Yeah. I'm seeing some applauses, and I've been thinking about getting an applause also after every presentation, but you have to imagine this for now.
That's fine. Yeah, guys, I also understand we've covered a lot of ground today. If you just want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm always putting out some good EUDR relevant content there to keep you up to date. shoot me a message as well. Happy to connect and have a really quick conversation just to give you a kind of situational report on what you need to do, what might be good. Even if that's not relative to us, I know that this stuff is a headache. So let's make that easier.
Yeah, maybe a question from my side. So, who is your ideal customer? Basically, is it the importer? Is it the product manufacturer? Is it anybody that takes rubber into the EU or?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different people who need analysis like this, right? So we work with directly with end customers like yourselves. We also work with service like intermediaries. So think traceability platforms, people who you bring on board to help with your analysis as well. This allows us to kind of be very good at what we do, which is the analysis, and kind of leave, if you have other challenges like tracing or mapping a supply chain, leaving that to one of our partners as well. So who's an ideal customer for us? Anyone who's really in trouble with the EUDR, who has a reasonably good understanding of visibility of their supply chain, and has, I guess, the technological imperative to do something about it as well. Again, we can ascertain that in a quick phone call, but I think, you know, if you're dealing purely in Excel spreadsheets or something like this, it'll be challenging to port that information across. But if you've got an ERP system or something where all of your information with your suppliers is housed, that's the perfect place for us to integrate in and make sure that we're not introducing another tool, but we're just integrating into your existing tool. Yeah, Jan, I can see your hand up.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you were starting with a customer saying it takes 2 hours to go through a new supply. What do you get when you get your when you're a customer of OpenAtlas? Do you get a piece of software where you look at, or how does it even work that if I get a container full of rubber that I don't even know where it's coming from? How can I look on your OpenAtlas?
Yeah, totally. So this is, again, it gets a little bit complicated now. So I try to stray away from it. We're an API-led solution, which means that we would integrate into your existing ERP solution. If you've built a traceability solution, if you're working with a traceability partner, we integrate into that. Our goal is not to introduce another platform that you and your teams need to work with, but rather to integrate into what you're doing already. So yeah, with that in mind, what do you actually get when we run analysis? You provide us with the area of interest around the world, harvest date, commodity type, 3 pieces of information. We send back to you a JSON response, which is all of this metadata associated with the plot. It tells you area, deforestation area, forest area. As I always like to say, all the ingredients to bake your own cake. But we also provide you with the cake as well. So we say if it's high, medium, or low risk. If you want to do your own granular analysis, you can do that. And that's on this side. What we also provide is verifiable evidence associated with the regulation, right? So this is what's going to happen when a regulator comes knocking. They're going to ask for verifiable evidence that your due diligence submission that says that everything is low risk is the case. So this is where we provide a large report that shows you different time series associated with overlaps around protected areas, indigenous areas, deforestation area, all of this fun, interesting, intriguing, other adequately conclusive and verifiable information per the regulation.
So basically it prevents you from, or it means that you don't have to go to the plot yourself, or does it go that far?
It depends, right? I think I always am very cautious not to, say that you can solve all your problems with remote sensing under the EUDR. I feel like people who make that assertion are overselling what's possible. I do say that everything that can be checked remotely, we do check, right? So in some cases, it depends on how your relationship with your supplier goes, right? Now, they'll provide you with the polygons, or, maybe you have to send someone out there and walk around a plot yourself, right? In either one of these cases, once that data is being gathered, then we can perform the analysis remotely. I feel like remote sensing is very much like looking over the hill. What's happening over the hill without having to go over the hill? Hey, Ben.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Harry, because what you were saying about the remote sensing reminded me of an important point, which is we often forget because we're so focused on deforestation metrics and measurement with remote sensing that behind all that a company needs to have a process, and they need to execute their due diligence process the way they've documented it. Because from an auditor's perspective, the data is like, it's an important technical part of that, but it's part of having a process and following it. That's really, due diligence before you talk about EUDR. And that it reminded me what you were saying, Harry, that probably for a lot of companies, if you don't already have a due diligence process for your sourcing and suppliers, that may be your challenge as well before you get to the, are your sourcing and supplier location information, if it's already in your ERP, connecting to Harry's API is going to be the least of your troubles. That's going to be just, flipping a switch and paying an invoice. But if you're trying to create a due diligence process because your company doesn't already have one, you probably need to start there, and then those technical pieces fall into place. Just not to go off topic, but it's an important point that you made.
It's incredibly on topic, right? There's a suite of things that need to be done for EUDR, right? The approach that we've taken is not to be a one-stop shop for everything. I feel like if you spread yourself too thin, you're not going to do anything super effectively. This is why I suggest, if this sounds relevant to you or your business, we can have a 5, 10, 15, half an hour, minute conversation and really ascertain or diagnose, what does your business need? Is it in need of process transformation? Does it need a map of supply chain? Have you got everything that you need in terms of data such that, a solution like ours could plug in? In all of these different ways, there is like an ecosystem of service providers who exist out there to make life easier. They're not free, certainly not, but they are built to be cheaper than if you were to do it yourself. And I think that's a crucial point. And yeah, if you're stressed about it, solutions are popping up like daisies or mushrooms or something like this to make life a little bit easier.
Yeah, I definitely hope
you got to ask first. You got to get the ball rolling. Do it before summer, because I think there'll be a real frenzy come September, October, November.
Yeah, we assume so too, and I think the team of Weber&Schaer can definitely confirm that also. If there's any other question from the group, please. And last question. I was actually curious. So, do you pay per service? Like, hey, I'm buying some natural rubber from a specific plot. Can you do the activity now, or do you work with subscription model?
Yeah, I always say a one-size-fits-all model doesn't fit two people in our world a little bit, but we generally do analysis kind of per hectare of analysis, right? So, and then revisits from that. But again, this works for some people, depending on what your volume is. There's kind of project-based discounts. There's like a annual all-you-can-eat model. There's a few different things that we make work depending on where you come in.
Makes all sense. Hey, thank you so much for your presentation. Also the answers to the questions, and indeed, if there's any remaining questions, please reach out to Harry. And then this did not work. Well, it did work, but I pushed the wrong button. There you go. So there's a final Q&A for the people that are remaining. We're a little bit over time. So if there's a final Q&A, or there is a final Q&A, if you have a remaining question, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. And I just want to remind for the people that are not a member of the platform yet, so we organize monthly webinars. We centralize knowledge on this topic, so also about the EUDR. And we give direct access to a network of rubber professionals. Of course, for the speakers of today, there's a free membership that we can give as a refund for your time and your willingness to present. And looking forward to any future webinars that we, of course, give. So let me know if there's any questions to the platform. Other than that, I would like to thank you everybody, also for everybody that's zoomed out already, for being with us today, and looking forward to see you for the members of the platform next week, Tuesday, at 4 p.m. CEST. Thanks, guys, Ben, Harry, and Anna, sorry, and Stefano. Thank you for being with us the whole webinar, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you very much. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.